Hi everybody, this is Lori at the Calico Cat Quilt Shop in Pipestone, Minnesota. And today we're going to talk a little bit about pressing seams and how to spin seams or twirl your seams if you've got a bunch of seams coming together. Sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not, but we're going to show you a little bit of what we got going on here. Probably the place you're more familiar with spinning seams is if you've got, say, a pinwheel. So your blocks are like that, and you have lots and lots of seams coming together here, and you want to try to get them to lay as flat as you can once you get it opened up. And so if you're doing something like this, if you press all the seams in the same direction, so if I press them all to the dark, then they will all go in the same direction and we can spin them when we get them together. Now, if you're doing something different than that, and it doesn't really matter what they are, but then you might, if you're not working with a pattern that tells you how to press your seams to minimize bulk, you might have to think it out a little bit more. And so what I sometimes will do, and if it helps, put them upside down, and I actually, it doesn't make any difference. But if I flip them over, it'll be easier to see. Just got to do them all the same way. So what I did on these is used an exaggerated seam allowance, so it's more than a half or more than a quarter inch, and that hopefully will make it a little easier to see. But what I can do is lay out upside down so that I can see the seam allowances easier, what my blocks are. Or if it helps me, lay them like this and go, okay, when I put these two seams together, will they nest? Because nested seams are going to be flatter seams, for one. And it also helps you get them lined up so that your seam allowances meet the way you'd like them to. So in this case, I've pressed two of my seams towards the dark and two of them towards the light fabrics. And if I sew them together this way, these two will nest because they're opposites. These two will nest because they're opposites. And these two will nest when I sew this seam together because they're opposites. And if I was to, say, do it this way and stop and think about it, I probably flipped them good enough. Anyway, let's try this. So these two are opposites, so these will nest. These two are opposites, so these will nest. But these are going the same direction on this corner and on this corner. So they will not nest, and that will add more bulk and make it more difficult to get my seams to match. So if I think about it, if I can keep that one there, so now we're back to opposites, opposites. Okay? Which is why it's really nice to have patterns that tell you which way to press your seams in order to keep things nice and neat. So this is the pinwheel that I was talking about. And what I've got, these go the opposite direction of these, and that's fine. That doesn't make any difference. They're all gonna, it's all a lot of bulk when it comes together. But I've got all of these pinwheel seams spinning the same direction, which helps them nest in the middle. And then I did the seams joining the two blocks opposite, so they nested. And now what I can do is if I pull these in the same direction, and you have to do this from the back side, in the same direction that these are spinning, so they're going counterclockwise, and you might have to this is mostly because my seam is so big. But if your stitches are real small or your seam is really big, you might have to pull a little thread. And I'm not even going to cut this thread. I just want it out of the way. But what I can do is press that with my iron so that my seams lay flat. But you can see now I have a mini pinwheel on the back side and my pinwheel on the front, and that's going to lay a lot flatter. So spinning your seams only works if your seams are going in the same direction, but you should be able to get them pushed flatter. It gets a little bit more complicated if you've got a whole line, because then you have to think it out and go, okay, I can spin them this way, but now my next one, if it's another pinwheel, has to spin the other way so that this lays flat. Otherwise you end up with this seam starting at the top and ending at the bottom. So it's worth it if you can think it out ahead of time, or if you've got a pattern designer that thought about it and told you that this is how you need to press your seams. Yeah, and that'll help things lay flatter. And what actually brought this up for me recently was a pattern that I was working on that's made of all half square triangles. So it's this one. It's got all half square triangles coming together, and what I was able to do, because I thought about it and yeah, got it figured out, is spin seams here, and so they lay one direction, and then spin the next seam so they lay the other direction. Okay, so again, and actually this time I've got all my seams going the same direction. My pinwheel is going this direction, and so are my other seams. But so what I'm going to do is, I know I need to get them this way to go the same direction, so I'm just going to pull and let those come unstitched a little bit. And again, might have to loosen the threads up a little to get them to lay flatter. But once I do, and I can press that with the iron, and I'll press it from the back side and then go to the front side and flatten it, press it that way. But that is how you get flatter seams, by spinning or twirling your seams on the back side. So sometimes it takes a bit to think it out, and sometimes the more blocks you put together, the more trouble it ends up being, which is why it's really nice when a pattern designer writes a pattern in a way that tells you how to press the seams to minimize bulk. But that doesn't always happen. So, and not everybody runs off of a pattern all the time either. Anyway, hope that was helpful, and we'll see you next time.